One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. I want you to imagine for a second that we're sitting across the table from one another. I have my afternoon latte, and you're going to tell me all about your podcast plans. You're really excited. You're like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to geek out with Crystal about podcasting. This is going to be so much fun. But then I ask the question, how's your podcast going? What am I assuming your answer is going to be? Because I can tell you from talking to hundreds of podcasters, probably thousands of podcasters at this point, one of the answers I often get to this question is, how is your podcast going? Is, well, I'm in research mode. Oh, and it's like, it's a cringe-worthy answer for me. Even if it's well-intentioned, even if it's the truth, even if you're like, no, literally, I have been researching this and I'm starting tomorrow, I still have this visceral reaction when someone tells me that they are in research mode. So we are going to dive into it today. I'm basically, you're in a therapy session with me now, because I'm going to get some things off my chest about how I feel with all of these podcasters stuck in research mode. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? I feel like in the last few episodes, I've been like referencing being your podcast therapist and like needing therapy and all the things that I like feel like I need to say I'm not any type of therapist whatsoever. I'm not licensed to give you any kind of advice like that. And I don't know why, but I just felt compelled to throw that little disclaimer in there because I've been talking about it. Yes, I have been to therapy before, and I think that there is a lot of really awesome things that you can learn about yourself whenever you get introspective and you start looking and evaluating like things that have happened, across your life. But I feel like this month, like all the episodes that have come out have been some of the things that you would talk about if you had a podcast therapist. Like normally I refer to myself as like, hey, I'm Crystal, your podcast coach. But I feel like there's been so many mindset things that I see all the time that we do not talk about. And that is really what I wanted to hit on this month, like the episodes that we've been putting out, because we haven't talked about them before. Like usually it's easy to talk about, hey, I can teach you how to do this. I will give you the how-tos and the 5 steps and the 12 steps. Like here's the 3 steps you need to start, launch, and market your podcast. Like I could do that all day until I'm blue in the face. But if I cannot actually get podcasters to take action or someone to go from an aspiring podcaster to having actually launched their podcast, then all of the things that I've done over the last few years will have been wasted, right? I'm not here just talking to talk. I mean, like, let's be real honest. I do love talking about podcasting, but that's not why I'm here. I'm not here just to speak at you. I'm trying to help you really resolve some of the issues where people get stuck. And one of those places, one of the top responses I get so often is, I'm in research mode. But I like to rephrase it to, oh, you're stuck in research mode. Now, let me set the scene for you, right? Like we're pretending we're sitting across the table, we're having a nice little coffee chat, and you have your beverage of choice. I've got my afternoon latte, which I don't. I mean, actually, while I'm recording this, it sounds really good. So I'm probably going to go make that here in a second because I'm like, that sound, y'all, it's nothing fancy. Let's cut to this real fast because this is the hard-hitting stuff that I know you really want to know. Back in 2020, when quarantine first happened, I told my husband, my only vice is coffee. We're going to invest in a really good coffee machine. And so we got one of those Ninja coffee makers that makes like cold brew, iced coffee, and it has a frother on the side. And I got to admit, like the frother is the most important piece of this whole contraption because I can make my own lattes. And here's what I do. I know this is total sidetrack, but it's important. Okay. If we're having coffee together, you need to know how I like my coffee. I just do regular. We have 3 boys. We always have milk in our fridge. So I have 2% milk. I heat it up in the fridge. It's not a full cup. It's probably about half a cup or 3/4 of a cup. I put it in my coffee mug. That goes in the microwave, 30 to 45 seconds. I take it out of the microwave. It does have to be warm, especially if it's ice cold from the fridge. You put that in the microwave. I add just a little pinch of sugar, and then I froth it, and it's so beautiful. It's so glorious. It makes my heart so happy when I have this big, foamy, it's just so good. It's almost a cappuccino, but it's a latte. It's what I'm calling it, at least. It's my version of a latte. And then I pour my hot coffee on top of it, and it's glorious. And I have one of those in the afternoon. I don't always have one in the morning because I'm like, that's a lot, like every day. But y'all, it makes me happy. Okay, so there you go. There's the quick aside of why us having a latte together is very special to me because I love my lattes. Okay, so we're going to get back to research mode because like I said, this is something that when I ask people who have told me, right? I'm not just talking to random people on the street that are like, hey, crazy podcast lady, can you get away from me? Like people that have told me, I want to have a podcast one day. Right? They don't have a concrete plan. Maybe they're like, I don't exactly know what I'm going to do, but I know that I want to have a podcast one day. It is in the stars for me to create a podcast. I'm like, that is fantastic. How is it going? How is your actual podcast planning going? When I ask this question, 2 things happen. Okay. It's one of 2 responses. The first one is just, it cracks me up every time because they give me this deer in headlights look that you would give to a teacher if she were to ask you, where's your homework? And you're like, oh crap, I didn't know we had an assignment due today. That is literally what happens when someone tells me like, oh, I want to have a podcast one day. Like, I'm so excited. I'm like, great. How's your planning going? Like, where are you? And they're like, what? But they just totally get stumped and they don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. I can see it in their eyes. They're like, I wish I could disappear and run away from Crystal as quickly as possible because I just realized she's a coach and this is what she does. And she's probably going to ask me, well, who are you going to talk about? What are you going to do? Like, she's going to just say all the things. And they just look like, I wish I could disappear away from this entire conversation, which is totally fine, but it happens a lot. That's response number one. The second response that I get, and this goes back to why this makes me cringe, I hear, oh, I'm still in research mode. I'm still in research mode. And this is why we're talking about it today. This is why we're dedicating an entire podcast episode and we're not just like, oh, we'll throw that in there as a funny little joke. No, we're definitely diving into this today because research mode is like a 4-letter word to me. It really is. I mean, I can't even say it correctly. Did you hear I said it really weird last time? Research mode. That's what I was trying to say. Oh my gosh. Hang on. I just had a moment too. Please tell me you've seen the movie The Incredibles, the animated movie. I just heard Edna mode. You know what I'm talking about. You know the character, you know the part where she's like going through her security and she says her name, Edna mode. And it's real monotone. That's how I feel like we're in research mode. Like, this is a bad thing. It's not a good thing to tell me that I'm still in research mode. Okay? All of you parents that have small children and you've seen The Incredibles, you're laughing right now. You're like, I know exactly what she's talking about. Everybody else, I'm sorry. It's just a weird, quirky thing. I quote movies very often. Sometimes my kids and I will speak exclusively in movies. I do the same thing with my husband too. So, yeah, welcome. You are officially part of this family now. We're having a latte together and like we're speaking in movie speak. Okay? This is what this podcast has come to and I'm here for it. This is actually a lot of fun for me. So, if you don't know what the term research mode means, if you're like, oh, that just means researching, hang on. There is a spectrum. As the more I talk to podcasters and the more I meet people, there is a spectrum of what I'm in research mode actually means. And that's what I want to break down because if you're listening to this and you have not started your podcast, it is likely you are stuck in research mode that is disguised as something that you think is actually really productive and a good use of your time. I'm going to debunk some of those today. All right. So here are a few examples. Like if a podcaster were to tell me, well, I'm in research mode and me being the coach that I am, I'm going to dig a little deeper and say, what does that mean? What does being in, quote, research mode mean? These are the answers I get. Well, I'm trying to find my podcast topic. I'm like, okay, well, that's good. What is your topic? Well, it's marketing. Okay, awesome. Like, well, what pieces of marketing do you want to talk about? Well, marketing was as far as I got. And I'm like, well, doesn't sound like you need to do more research if you know marketing. But, okay, let's keep going. Your topic is marketing. Well, is there anything specific about it? Well, that's the part I'm trying to research. I'm trying to explore all of the options of marketing. And I say, okay, well, tell me more. Tell me more. What are your thoughts? What are you thinking? Well, I could go the angle of online marketing, email marketing, social media marketing, in-person marketing, outbound marketing, B2B marketing, B2C marketing. Like there's so many different options. And me, I'm just like white as a ghost. I'm like, yes, there are lots of options. Do you know the background on any of these? Because I think what happens is we look at all the possibilities that are out there when it comes to podcast topics and all the things that we know and that we're passionate about. And then we say, oh, I'm really not an expert in these, but I could be. So I'll wait and start my podcast whenever I've got like 6 more months of experience under my belt. And then I can start that really super niche podcast that no one else really has. This is a bad plan. Okay. If this is you, if you're nodding, you're like, oh crap, that's me. This is a bad plan. Okay. But I'm not going to give you the solution yet. We're just going to keep going down with the bad ideas of, quote, research mode. Okay, so that's one. The next one is when someone tells me they're in research mode and I say, what does that look like? They say, well, I'm deciding on the audience and who I want to speak to. I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. Like, this is great. This is what you're supposed to do, right? So, well, tell me more. Like, where are you stuck? Like, what are you researching further?
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
And this is where it all goes downhill from there. So they will tell me, well, I created this survey. I spent hours creating this incredible survey that I'm going to send to my audience. But then I realized I only have about 20 people in my audience, and I got one response back, and it was my cousin, who I know is not in my ideal audience. I'm pretty sure that she just checked all the boxes and wrote like, you're doing a great job. Like, that is not helpful. So I decided I really need to start building my audience, and then I'll send my survey to all of those people on my social media and my email list, and then they'll tell me what I need to talk about and who I really need to speak to, because I will have grown my audience, and then I'll be ready to launch my podcast. You can already guess. I'm going to say this is not a great strategy. While I love that you're trying to survey your audience and, understand exactly who you want to talk to, this is not the approach that I'm going to suggest you take. Okay, so this is number 2. The next one is, well, I'm trying to choose my podcast name, but I just can't settle on just the right one. Just the one that I think, oh my gosh, like a bolt of lightning struck the ground. It hit me. And I'm like, yes, this is the podcast name I should have. It came from heaven above. And I know that this is the name I was meant to have. And they say that hasn't happened yet. And I'm like, well, just to let you know, it will probably never happen that way. Like, seriously, I don't know anyone that has named a podcast that said, this was given to me by God himself. He hand delivered it on a sticky note and placed it gently in my lap one Tuesday morning whenever I was drinking my latte. No, that's never happened. What I do see happening, and we'll talk about this in a second, but what I do see is people get in the trenches of trying to find the right name for their show, and then it's taken, and then they say, well, I thought of this amazing idea, and Susie Q from Georgia had that idea first, so my name's taken, I quit. And they give up. They say, well, the name that I wanted to use is taken. I don't have any other good ideas, so podcasting isn't for me. And they just throw in the towel because the one spark of inspiration that they did have is gone. It's taken, and they can't use it. So therefore, they're not stuck in research mode. They just gave up on research mode. They're like, no, I searched for one term, one time, it's gone. Why should I even podcast? This is not a good solution to your problem either. Okay, I got 2 more to share with you. the next thing, whenever I dig deeper and say, what does research mode look like for you? They say, well, I'm working on the creative piece of my artwork. Should I hire a designer? Should I just do this myself? And I'm like, oh, yes, that means that they've probably recorded some episodes. Like they got stuff out there. Like they're ready. Like this is one of the last things before they launch their podcast out into the world. And so whenever I start digging and I say, well, how many episodes have you recorded? Like, do you have a launch date? Are you ready to go? And they're like, oh no, I just know that I have to figure out my artwork first, because if I can't imagine my podcast in someone's hands, like them going to it and listening to it on their phone, then it's not really a real podcast. I need to have the artwork first. And I get to the point where I'm like ready to pull my hair out, right? Because I'm just like, oh my gosh, like you could literally go into Canva and type in, this is my podcast, whatever the name of it is, slap it up there and go for it. Make it happen. But people just overthink this one piece. And yes, a podcast artwork is a big deal. It is something that you should spend time on, but not 6 months. Y'all, you do not need to spend 6 months creating your first piece of podcast artwork. Why can I say that with confidence? Because I know probably 20 shows, I'm not exaggerating, 20 shows that I've been following for the last probably 6 years that have changed their artwork. Some of them multiple times. So if you're saying like, oh, I just gotta, it's not perfect yet. I don't have the right font. I don't have the right picture. You got to go with something, okay? You got to go with something. And now I'm jumping ahead of myself because I am going to give you some solutions to how you can get out of research mode. But this one just really frustrates me when people say, I've been creating my podcast artwork for months and months and it's still not perfect. And they haven't even started recording. They have not even started recording. All they've done is settled on a name and maybe a topic. They haven't even started recording because they're like, I got to figure out my artwork before I do anything else. I'm just like, oh my gosh, you're trying to kill me. This is not going to work. Okay. The last response I get when I dig deeper on research mode, and I could keep going, but this is where I decided to cut it off because this kind of groups in most of people's reasons of research mode. They're trying to figure out podcasting by dedicating hours and hours on Google and YouTube, and they find themselves circling around in circles, like just going like, oh, this video went here and this, and most of it has to do with recording. Like, let's just be really honest. They're trying to figure out, how do I record a show that sounds like an award-winning production? How can I make it where I do this and do that? But then they get in there and they're like, wait, do I need to record in stereo or mono? How does this work? I don't even know what that's mean. Like, let me go back. Let me go back to YouTube. Let me go to Google. Do I need to have both of these lines moving at the same time? And do they need to align totally together? Does it need to be, what's the decibel? What does that even mean? Why are these numbers negative? What's the hertz? Like, there's all this information. And so you're dedicating hours and hours and hours trying to figure out Audacity or Hindenburg or Audition or GarageBand, wherever you're recording, and you're stuck. You are stuck. Whether you want to call it research mode or whatever it is, you say, oh, well, 3 weeks ago I tried to record something, but it didn't work. So yeah, I really haven't done much else to figure it out. So I'm just I don't know. We'll see. Those are the people I run into. This is where I get so frustrated. And I get it. Y'all, I get it. I have done almost all of these things too. It's actually one of the strategies that I used to launch my very first podcast in 2018. I didn't buy a course. I watched a ton of YouTube videos for about 2 months straight. I remember it's really cool that I did the journaling and I look at the day where I said, I think I want to start a podcast, to I just launched my podcast, and it was 59 days. It was 59 days that it took me to figure out how all this podcasting stuff work. Like, what's the title? What's the name? How would I want it to be? But for me, research mode becomes a very big concern, especially as your podcast coach. When I run into you, the same people that said, I want to start a podcast. And then 6 to 12 months later, I ask, well, how is your show going? And your response is, I'm still in research mode. That right there is the cringe-worthy response that I'm just like, oh gosh, you're just stuck. You're stuck. You're stuck and you don't know how to get unstuck. It's totally different if your life is chaotic and you're like, I just can't do this. I have a lot of family things. I have personal things. I have professional things. It's not the right time for my business. Like, all of those are legitimate reasons. I'm not talking to those people. I'm talking to those of you that say, I'm in research mode. This is what you tell me. I am in research mode with my podcast. And I'm like, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? So instead of being stuck in research mode, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, I've been in research mode for the last 2 years, this stops today. We are changing this today. So I'm giving you 4 steps that you need to make some decisions and get started ASAP. Okay. Number 1, write this down. Write this down. Go to the show notes. The show notes are crystalprofit.com/episode 282. The first thing you're going to do is plan, right? This is something we all have to do. You have to plan out, what does this look like? And honestly, I'm such a big proponent of journaling. I'm just going to recommend it to everybody, but I would just journal. Pretend that I am asking you, what are the goals and the dreams of your podcast? Use that as your writing prompt and just start writing. You can talk about the topic you want to speak about, the audience you want to talk to, the content you think that your people would love. Just start brain dumping all of these ideas, but you got to start planning somewhere. Okay? This typically is easy for everyone. They're like, oh, I got this. But the second part is where people get stuck. The second part is research. This is part of the process. You should be researching. You should be looking at other people's titles to make sure you're not taking someone else's name. You should be asking your audience, what kind of content do you want? Is this really the person that I want to speak to? And all these things. Research is a good thing, but it turns into that 4-letter word when you don't take action. Okay, you cannot be stuck in research mode and actually have a podcast. Those two are not the same. Okay, so you have to plan, you have to research, and then number 3 is you have to just make a decision. You have to make a decision, and it doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all perfect decision that's the Lord willed for this to happen. No. But you do have to make some decisions to get started. It is literally why our motto around here is keep it up. We all have to start somewhere because we do. I was the one that needed to hear this whenever I first came up with the slogan, whenever I first started saying, this is my tagline, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere because I needed to hear that. I needed to hear, everyone starts at 0. Everyone starts with not knowing exactly what they're doing. Everyone starts with kind of being clumsy and having a clunky process and, just getting going. Everyone has that. But you won't have that unless you make a decision. So get out of research mode and just make a decision. And then the 4th thing is evaluate. Evaluate. This is really important, especially for you perfectionists out there. I am talking to you. I'm talking to you that are stuck in research mode because you want everything to be, quote, perfect. Just know that if you've made a decision with your podcast and you don't love it, it's not the end of the world. I mean, if you've listened to this show, you've been around here for a while, you know that this podcast did not start off in the very beginning and it just transform overnight into what it is today. There was a process. There were there was how many? 40 episodes of an entirely different podcast before this show became the Profit Podcast. 40. Y'all, it's not like I launched one episode and said, oh my gosh, this is wrong. I need to just switch to podcasting. No. I did that podcast for a while. But then I sat down, I evaluated, which is step 4, right? We're planning, we're researching, we're making a decision, then we're evaluating our decisions and we're saying, is this still the way that I want to run this podcast? Is this still the topic I want to speak about? Is this still the audience I want to speak to? So I want you to evaluate and see, should you make changes? Should you make improvements? Or should you pivot altogether? And I'm going to recommend, if you are listening to this and you've been in research mode and you're just getting started, maybe you're about to launch, give yourself 3 months before you make any changes. So launch your show with the predetermined content you already had and maybe put out 12 to 15 episodes and then ask yourself, do I still love this topic? Do I feel comfortable speaking to this audience? Am I energized with my podcast? Because if you're not, then it's time to evaluate. But y'all, you just got to get started. Stop saying, I'm in research mode, like it's a cute little I'm just practicing. I'm just trying this thing out. If you're going to do it, do it. And y'all know, if you have been around here, I'm like, should I say this? Should I not say it? I'll say the clean version in case you have littles listening. But y'all, my dad was a plumber, for all of my life. And he would always use the term poop or get off the pot. You know what I'm talking about. It's the other 4-letter word that I'm not going to say. I really want to because it would have a lot more emphasis, but poop or get off the pot. What are you even doing? If I ask you, and I will do this, if I see you and I say, how is your podcast going? If we're in the DMs, if you send me an email, if we run into each other at a conference and I say, how's your podcast going? And you say, I'm in research mode, I will literally say the other phrase to you. Poop or get off the pot. Okay? Whew, y'all. We needed this today. This all needed to come out because y'all telling me I'm still in research mode is not going to fly anymore. I feel like I have spoken, I've laid down the law, and I don't really say that there's rules around here, but this is one of them. If I talk to you, please do not tell me that you're in research mode because I will forward this podcast to you and say, you need to go listen to this. Okay? We can't even continue our conversation. I will walk away from my latte at the table and say, you need to go listen to this podcast episode more than we need to finish our conversation. Okay? This is very, very serious because I want to see you get your podcast out into the world. Okay, I'm going to step off the soapbox. I'm going to step off. Okay, I'm stepping down because I do need to be a little bit more light and cheery and fun for the next thing that I'm about to tell you. Because if you are listening to this in real time, we are about to start our 5-day podcast challenge. It is actually starting on Monday, August 23rd. It goes through August 27th, 2021. So if you're listening to this later, the challenge is over probably, and maybe you won't have the option to join us. But if you are listening to this and you're like, I really need some of Crystal's coaching in my life, or you just want to ask questions, you want to do some Q&A, you want to have some motivation from other podcasters, you want to finally, you're like, okay, Crystal, I'm going to poop and get off the pot. You're like, this is me. I don't want to be stuck in research mode again. You need to join us in the challenge. So you'll go to crystalprofit.com/challenge to sign up. There's going to be a link in the show notes of this episode, but I want to see you there. I want to see you. And maybe you can even say, Crystal, I listened to your episode about being in research mode. I have been here. Maybe you can tell me how long. I promise. If you're in the challenge, I won't yell at you. I won't yell at you for being in research mode, okay? Because you have come to the right place. You've realized I need help with my podcast. So you will be welcomed with open arms, okay? But I want you to sign up. So there will be a link in the show notes. Again, the show notes for this episode are crystalprofit.com/episode 282. But that's all I have for y'all today. So go check out the show notes. Go look at the 4-step plan. And I'm going to do a recap real fast. Number 1 is plan. 2, research. 3, make a decision. 4, evaluate. It really is as simple as that. So I want you to take this information, go do some journaling, take a walk around the neighborhood, whatever it is you have to do, but think about what is the thing that is holding you back from starting your podcast. But that's all I have for you today. So make sure that you are following the show wherever you're listening. And I cannot wait to chat with you again about podcasting next week. So remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.